7-Eleven made the headlines today in the New York Times with the title, Immigration Agents Target 7-Eleven Stores in Push to Punish Employers. The article is a superficial story that tells you 21 people across 17 states and 98 stores were arrested, and it was the largest immigration sweep of this kind nationally with ICE. Now, for those of you outside the United States, 7-Eleven is a chain convenience store in most states of the United States. It has a reputation for being a Pakistani or an Indian-run store, despite the chain being owned by a Japanese-American company. And the reason that this, like a handful of other chain stores, is known for being run by Middle Eastern people is that it's a ready-made business. It's an out-of-the-box franchise with a low barrier of entry. These types of businesses are already branded businesses that aren't too picky about who buys in as long as a person has enough money. So it's an attractive opportunity for first-generation families to be business owners. Now, 7-Eleven is not the first business model that comes to mind if I were in charge of going in for a sweep to look for undocumented immigrants. And the reason is how many employees work in a 7-Eleven on any given shift? Maybe 2, maybe 10 people altogether as they rotate through. More often than not, the employees in these types of stores are just family members of owners. Because 7-Eleven is a franchise, it's common for one person to own 3, 5, 10 stores. So I'm suspicious to wonder if this wasn't a target of a single owner or a couple of owners that were trafficking people, perhaps. Another version of human trafficking that we don't hear about too often is for sub-wage employee work. And there are these franchise business models that could exploit large numbers of people where an ICE sweep could easily pick up hundreds of undocumented people in a short amount of time. In the past, we've seen donut and coffee shops that were especially vulnerable to this type of activity. You could have 4 to 14 people working on any given shift, and then one owner can own 6 stores rotating multiple people through different stores. These people will very often be invited guests from another country and have their papers and documents held onto by their boss. They're given a place to stay and food, and then they're told they need to work to pay for their room and board. And then they make an under-the-table wage after their debts are met. And so this is a form of indentured servitude where people from other countries will actually work for quite some time before they start to learn that they're being exploited. It's not common, but it happens enough to number in the hundreds, maybe even thousands of people in the United States working under these conditions. Now, this has been more realistic over the last 10 years as these out-of-the-box franchises have had such a squeezed profit margin. And when you mix that with a state that's not business-friendly, the first thing you get is cut in payroll. So owners try to start to find ways to stay in business without being leaned on by payroll taxes, unemployment compensation, insurance taxes, state income taxes, state property taxes, town property taxes, and then on top of that, the service fees to hire professionals to process these taxes. Having employees in a hostile business environment means that for an employee making $10 an hour, an employer has to pay right around $18 per hour. And business owners who are more likely to survive are going to be the ones who can start getting creative. Now, interestingly enough, these employee costs ironically don't exist when family members work inside the business. So if people who can be labeled cousins come over ready to live in America and have room and board, well, then you can get people to work for basically free, but more importantly, without the tax and paperwork burden. So this is a sloppy state policy that's created these environments that make trafficking people attractive. And it's ironic that some states aren't willing to give up its money on tax leniency, but it doesn't stop the endless flush of welfare fraud that happens in these stores every day, hand over fist. The 7-Eleven is just a branded version of a bodega, and these stores are on every corner in every neighborhood, and the racket is EBT and food stamps. If you're wondering why half the stores in the mall are vacant, and you can't even go to your favorite restaurant anymore because it was replaced with the Salvation Army, but you have this lingering question on how the bodega down the street from your kid's school is still in business when it's had the same box of butter in the ice cream reach-in priced at $4.99 for the past month, I can quell your suspicions. This is welfare fraud. And living just an hour outside of New York City, I almost never walk into one that doesn't participate in a handful of versions of welfare fraud. First, many of these store owners don't even have relationships with actual wholesalers because they don't actually sell enough grocery to have accounts with food makers. What they do is they go to Walmart and they buy up all the cheapest boxes of cereal for $2.79, and then they stock their shelves with a reprice of $5.99, knowing that people who don't have cars will be willing to walk down to the corner and swipe an EBT card, because it's free money anyway. They'll do this with all sorts of food, but also they'll accept drop-offs from shoplifters for energy drinks or energy shots. They could pay a shoplifter $1 and then sell the product for $4. Where I live, we even had one bodega that was buying cheese and meat from a crack addict shoplifter, and he was only stopped when it got so out of control that the guy was taking huge deliveries from stolen meat, and the store that was being robbed had to report it several times to the police before he even got any help. Baby formula fraud is a huge money sinkhole. A store owner will buy a stock of baby formula at Walmart for $12 a can, and then reprice it at $25 a can. Women with babies can come in with a state-issued formula coupon, give the coupon to the owner, get the formula, and then the owner can then charge the state the $25. And then the woman will come back and resell the formula back to him for $5 or $6 or trade it in for cigarettes. Then he sells it again for another $25 state-issued coupon, and he's just circulating the same case of baby formula in a circle. And who knows what's been done to it once it's even left the store. And this kind of practice has been going on for decades. Now, these practices are harder to catch than the obvious. The obvious fraud is generally the owner will know his neighborhood, so he knows who lives there and he knows that he's not being set up. And the food stamp card holder will swipe $200 on his register and then give the customer $50 to $100 cash. You know you're in these waters when you go into a neighborhood and there are 6 bodegas, a 7-Eleven, and a check cashing store, but there are no grocery stores or any retail stores that can stay in business. So the 7-Eleven, it's a good place to start, but the cleanup needs to go much deeper than just rooting out people whose paperwork are in the wrong order. It needs to punish employee slave trade and that sinkhole of a welfare fraud.